we will talk about knives. Yes, and axes. Let's get rid of these. So we have an assortment of blades here, all handmade from your amateur self and from a more experienced people. This is a Yakut blade. We have a table knife here. Here is another hand forged blade, a double-edged. Here are some Mora knives. And this is a specialty for carving and slöjd. Here is also for carving. I don't think this is Mora, but it's for hollowing. But it does have a cutting edge. Folding knives. More blades, double-edged. I've started this long time ago, but I haven't continued on it. Folding blades. Kitchen knife or chef's knife, probably just kitchen knife. I don't think chefs would be offended, call this chef's knives. Common kitchen knife. Bread knife with a serration. Another carving knife for slöjd. Small saw. Scissor. Small Wetterling's hatchet. A Finnish Billnäs axe head without a haft, a saw, bow saw, cheese cutter, handmade blade, handmade handle, 3,000 subscriber giveaway, another knife. You might call this a puukko, Finnish puukko, but puukko actually just means knife. Oh, the click. Woo. Oh. Another handmade blade. So, small hatchet, Wetterlings, another plastic fiber, Fiskars. Another Fiskars, more of a split, and the big boy felling competition axe for hardwood, huge. So, I think you guys know everything about knives already from what you yourselves have used and what you have watched other people use and what you have heard about. So what is my contribution to the conversation about knives and cutting tools when being out there in the forest, in the savannas, actually, yeah. I don't know if you already know about me, but I was born in Chad, in Central Africa, but I grew up in the Central African Republic. And I didn't have any of these things growing up. Growing up in the Central African Republic, I spent a lot of time outdoors. We lived in the northern country, where it's mostly borders towards Chad. And Chad is mainly, that's where the Sahara Desert starts. So the northern part of the Central African Republic is very arid, dry, and crooked trees and very hard wood and tall grass and just very, very dry. And we also lived in the southern part of the Central African Republic, which borders towards the Congo and the jungle. So the southern part is leveling down to the jungle. So I have also experienced the outdoors in that environment, and so I have come to use several kinds of cutting tools. But with that said, Growing up, I didn't have my own knife or my own axe or machete, or I didn't have my own cutting tool. In fact, none of my friends had their own. And whenever we made a project out of going fishing or hunting or slingshotting, one of us would borrow a knife or some axe or a machete from home, and that would be what we all would share. So imagine dozens of kids under a tree preparing their fishing rods, cutting, but there was only one cutting tool, and we would pass it on amongst us, and we would help each other holding something and cutting it, or the rubber bands for slingshots. One person would hold it, spread it, and the other with a razor blade would come and cut the perfect size. So we all learned together how to use it, and some were more advanced than others, some were older than others, but we all learned together by sharing the same cutting tool, both in preparation for going out and also out there. In the Central African Republic, let me see if I can find a blade here. What was common in the Central African Republic were double-edged knives, just a wooden handle that would look like a dagger-like handle, and a cutting and a double-edged cutting. And that's basically what I grew up with. The steel was of very poor quality, very soft, and it would easily bend and it would easily become dull, and we would just hit it or fix it in something and straighten the edge out. Very soft, very poor quality, but it served us very well. We always managed to do and complete whatever project we intended. Then further down in the jungle, it was mostly machetes and sometimes axes. So for me, this idea of having one universal knife that would be the perfect steel, the perfect technical durability, with the perfect long-lasting razor-sharp edge, or the perfect length, the perfect width of the backbone, I've never encountered it until we moved to Sweden. The idea of having one knife to cover all your needs, I think it's an ideal that we are all intrigued by and that we are all looking for, and we always customize and modify whatever knife we happen to have, and which makes the whole thing very interesting, honestly. But I never grew up using saws or this kind of saws out in nature, or bow saws, or if we needed to fell something, we used our machete or an axe. My first real knife was a kitchen table that I took from home, and I just sharpened the sides of it, both sides, because that's what I was used to, double-edged blades, and that's what was available in all families' homes. And that knife will be used for everything, cutting vegetables, cutting meat, cutting branches, whittling on fishing rods, for everything. And I've even found myself using kitchen knives. It was a good heft in it, comfortable handle, nice large blade, but as a cutting tool it was nice, and I managed to do what I needed to do with it. Would a bread knife also work for outdoors? Why not? Why not? Is it cool to use it? It's arguable, but it has a serrated blade, serrated edge, which is very more efficient than you would think, but why not? It would act like a saw. It's a combination of a saw and a knife, so why not? I mean, people take saws with them out there. I think we all know more or less what the idea behind a wood cutting tool for the outdoors is. It's basically what we intend to do out there. But there is also this notion that in a survival situation, it's good to be prepared and have a good knife. And that's, I think, where the idea of having this universal perfect knife would come in, that you would always have with you. But can you fillet a fish with a saw? Yes, you can, but it will be messy. But in a survival situation, you would be able to eat. Can you do it with an axe? Absolutely. Even though this is a splitting edge. But why not? Sharpen it up and butcher your fish and you would eat. No problems. Can you fillet a knife with a kitchen knife? People do it all the time. And in fact, I always find myself reaching for the kitchen knife when I do repetitive filleting that would take hours and hundreds of fishes to go through. I actually prefer a kitchen knife than to a filleting knife with the flexible blade and thin. I like the rigidity of the stiffness of the kitchen knife when I fillet, and I always sharpen it up. That's crucial. Always very sharp so that it just butters through those bones. Amazing. This is amazing as a filleting knife. Can you fillet a fish with this cutting, hollowing, crooked style wood carving knife? Can you do it? Yes, but it will take a bit of more patience and skill, but there is a cutting edge here. And if you absolutely need to eat that fish, you will manage. And let's talk about this knife here. This is a purposefully made knife for wood carving. And as such, it's perfectly designed to bite into wood and give you that strength with this short blade that just very narrowly points down, but as a cutting tool it's amazing. So why don't we bring this up when we go out? The point I want to raise is that perhaps there is not that perfect knife that will cover all needs, but we can come pretty close to it. And I think maybe there is also a tendency to be stuck on this idea to have with you the perfect knife. Scissor, why not? It has a nice cutting edge, you can sharpen it, you can cut the cords. This is amazing to cut paracords. Maybe even better than knives. You can use one side to fillet your fish, whittle on your stick. Why not? I mean, it's just imagination. Anyways, what do I use when I go out? If I just bring my knife with me and nothing else, I feel very naked and handicapped. When I go out, I always kind of intend to make a fire, and to make a fire I need to get to those bigger logs, and with a knife like this I can't really do it. I'm limited, and I find myself sometimes when I go out and I also happen to have a hatchet or an axe with me, that I find myself never using my knife at all. So it's interesting, which brings us over to hatchets and axes of different kinds and different weights. I find that when I only have my axe with me, I feel more comfortable and I feel more prepared than I would with only a knife. Because in my experience, a knife is limited. It's very good to have, but it can only take you so far. Whereas a small hatchet will cover all the needs of what a knife might be able to do and more. And so in my world, it would be better to get used to using an axe and reach a comfortable size of an axe. Once you do that and you learn how to use it in different situations, different circumstances, different sizes of logs and branches and sticks, and making fires with it and filleting fishes and cutting your meat and sausage, whittling on that sausage grilling stick, or even felling bigger logs to build yourself a shelter. In my world, this is the way to go. And then it's up to you to find out which size you're comfortable with as weight on your backpack, or carrying, or just over your shoulder when you walk. So for me, the perfect cutting tool for being outdoor is a good axe. And the hatchet is amazing in that there is a good heft to it. You can come up close with your hand. You can do all these small micro movements that the weight of it and your wrist lets you do. But when you move up in size in axes, you become limited in that. The axe becomes more cumbersome to maneuver and do these. You start finding yourself using your whole arm instead of just your wrist when you do small work. But with that said, a good felling axe will still, if you learn it and get comfortable with the weight of it and the size of it, you will do more things than with a small hatchet. The hatchet has its limitations also, but you can circumvent them by using it as a wedge and use the axe to manufacture some sort of hammer from a wood and you can do amazing things with it. Fell big trees. It will take more time, yes, but there is always a compromise with whatever you decide to choose. I see people bring with them saws, knives. 3,000 subscriber giveaway. Subscribe, watch the video, and throw your name in there. So people bring with them saws, knives, and an axe, and a multi-tool. For me, I don't mean to criticize whoever brings all these things with them when they are out there. My take when I see that is that maybe you would do better off if you just picked one of them and learn to use it in all its limitations and all the kinds of different situations and scenarios. Use it as much as you can and learn its margins, learn its pros and cons, and then from there you can then move on to the next one. But when you bring it out multiple cutting tools, that gives me who watches the notion that maybe you need to practice more with simpler things and just one cutting tool before bringing all of those things out there. Because in most cases you would be able to do everything you need to do in a forest or forest environment with an axe. Absolutely. Please note that I say forest environment because the cutting tool you bring out with you will depend on your own personal circumstances and where you take them. Maybe it's not an axe that suits that environment. Maybe it's a machete, or maybe it's just a bigger knife. But the idea is learn that tool well and don't bring out three to 10 different cutting tools. I think what I wanted to emphasize here is that there is a difference concerning what type of knife to bring out there and what you intend to do with. If I will do repetitive cuts, same kind of monotonous cuts like filleting a fish, then I want to have a knife that is specialized in that. And I find myself preferring a kitchen knife over a purposefully made filleting blade because I feel more comfortable with this. I like it better. I work better with it than a filleting knife. Cheese cutter. Why not? Why not? Why not, guys? If this is all I had, for some reason, if I brought the block of cheese out there and I only had this cheese cutter with me and nothing else, why not? Sharpen the edge and use it. In fact, some of you might even already think of the Inuit knife with the half moon blade that they use for cutting their meat, skinning, and filleting fish. Another factor to consider when choosing your cutting tool is which season you intend to use it, because winter season and summer season or autumn season, they are very different and they are very demanding in different ways. For instance, in the winter time, for me an axe would make more sense than a knife or a saw. Some people might argue it's just me. And in the summertime, when everything is dry and nice and tipped up and you can just gather sticks and pine cone or dried old man's beers to start your fire, maybe you don't even need to have an axe with you. So, but it would still be very useful as a universal cutting tool even in the summer, and it would even take over and cover all the needs of a good knife. But in winter, absolutely. Just a small knife in the winter, I feel very handicapped and compromised. Whereas a good hefty axe, I feel comfortable, I feel confident that I would take myself out of every situation out there in the wintertime. And as far as saws, and this is just me personally, I don't like saws. I mean, for me, this kind of bow saw has its purpose only when I do repetitive wood cutting jobs at home to get fire, to fill my shed with firewood. I will be more comfortable using that there. Whenever I use a bow saw in the outdoors, I always find myself being very frustrated because when you use it and cut it and you have this log and you come halfways and then a bit more than halfways and that log starts to pinch or even if it's lying down, that log will start to pinch the blade, and the saw blade has to be perfectly smooth and clean in order to work itself like butter. But as soon as there is some sort of residue, or you have the wrong kind of blade, this is for dry wood, it's not for green wood, many of you will probably point out. So even with saws there is a special. And then you have, this is not a foldable saw, but I will use it to represent it, and it's mostly this size. I mean, it will cut, but in my world it's like micro movement that will only make me sweat, and it has its limitations in the size that the logs you cut are limited. You will not cut logs that are larger than the blade itself. Some of you maybe will, but it will be a tough undertaking. And it's the same thing there also. If you go with bigger logs standing and you start cutting, you have to find a technique that allows you to cut without pinching it. Plus this small size. And I think this is becoming a rant video. Frustrating and unnerving, and a source of sweat instead of efficiency. And if you are bringing this small size axe and you limit yourself to these small logs, then I don't see the point of it. Why not then just move over to a small hatchet, or with one chopping movement go through that log instead of spending your time in micro movements and sweating. In those cases, even this small Swiss Army would probably do what this saw would do. I mean, if you have a stick that you're going through, just carve a circle around it and then break it. Done. I mean, it will do it. It's comparable. Some will argue that, well, if you have to build something and you make joineries that ends, and then yes, it will do that, but then again, you can circumvent the saw by learning to use a good knife instead. So I have watched a lot of bushcrafting videos out there, and in most cases I see people bring out multiple kinds of cutting tools. And sometimes there is this idea that one tool equals 0 tools and 2 tools equal 1 tool. And the idea is that if you lose one, then you have one. There has to be a limit. You can't bring 5 tools thinking that that would be 4 tools. So what's my take? My take is pick one and learn it well. Learn to use it within its margins, with all its pros and cons, and then build on it. You will find that in most cases you can do whatever you need with one tool, and as more your experience grows in different situations, you will find that, yeah, for this specific purpose here, that tool will be better. And so next time you go out, you will try that tool, and you will then also find its limitations. So it's always an interesting experience, and I think all of it is why it pushes us towards this idea of one perfect knife cover all our needs. And that again brings us to this idea of if we only have one good perfect strength blade and good size and good width that is supposed to fell trees and butter your bread, or whittle small sticks and make a fire, and with a pointy blade and make holes. And so, I mean, at some point, at some level, you have to argue that you have to abuse that knife to cover all the needs that you would need. For me, these things are sacred for me. If I happen to have a knife with me, it's sacred. If I happen to have an axe with me, it's sacred. I don't abuse them. You know, historically here in Scandinavia, there were 2 knives that people would bring with them. One smaller knife and one larger knife. I take this to represent the larger knife, but this is actually also considered a small knife. A larger knife, which is called just storkniven, which just means big knife, or the big knife, and it would be a chopping knife. And in Central Africa, most people didn't have the luxury of bringing 2 knives. But I know that in the Western world, for instance in the trapping world back in the days, they would also have 2 knives with them. One for processing meat, fish, and so on, and one for doing dirty work, just dirty work. And they would never mix those 2 up. the meat knife, they would always keep clean and sharpened and use it only for meat and processing food, whereas the dirty knife would take over the other areas of being outdoors. So yes, for me the perfect cutting tool to take with me out there is a heavier sized axe. It's not a knife, it's not a saw. But then again, it depends on the environment I'm in. If I'm in the jungle, yes, the axe would be very good because those trees are enormous. But the machete will also do well because they are also hefty. But the machete will not cut down a big jungle tree, an axe will. So that's where I find myself. After using knives of all kinds and saws, like purposefully tried to bring saws with me, all kinds of saws. I have brought this type of hand saws with me also, just to use, but just to learn it and see its limitations in the wild. Just like I have brought bow saws and foldable saws, and for me this is it. A good sized axe. I can do whatever I want with it. Fillet fish, chop down firewood, chop down trees for my shelter, ward off ward off bears.
Nej, 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 nej. Gå bort! Gå bort!
Yeah, I don't think I would have a big chance on bears with this, but at least it would feel more confident than with a knife in my hand. And confidence is a key when encountering wild animals. Not that it would give you the strength to fight them, but it will give you that boost to stand your ground and yell at them. And if you have a hefty or something in your hand, it will root you. It will give you that confidence. Whereas this will not do it. So on that level, not fighting. So again, you have to see to your needs and your different seasons and your environment to pick out that perfect cutting tool. For me, the axe rules everything. All seasons, all environments, and all kinds of chores. For me, maybe not for you. One other thing to consider out there, should be put very seriously into the category, is chainsaws. Because seriously, in most cases, when we go out backpacking or camping or so, we want to limit our weight. But when we go out, we also go in this romanticized feeling and exoticism to go and enjoy and relax and so. But if you have serious work to do out there in the forest, chainsaw. I mean, nothing beats a chainsaw. And the chainsaw in a survival environment, and if you also have the fuel for it, which you will likely have if you do bring a chainsaw with you, that's the ultimate survival tool, and it would beat the axe by horse length. But chainsaws, I mean, with chainsaws also comes four-wheelers, ATVs, and trailers behind the ATV, or just a big-sized vehicle that would carry a lot of other equipment. And it's very seldom that you would go camping with a chainsaw and gallons of fuel with you, or in today's modern world, electric chainsaws with packs and packs of batteries. So all that takes us back to the axe, because the axe is still a very strong alternative as the multi-purpose cutting tool when you're out there enjoying yourself, or getting efficiently busy for your homestead and you lack a chainsaw. This is my choice. So another area we need to cover with the knives, or the way the knife is built. I'm looking for a full tang knife, but I don't have a full tang knife. But that's one discussion that comes into it, that for you to have the perfect universal knife, it has to be full tang.
Why?
I don't know.
Why?
I don't know. Yes, it's strong and will be durable, but do you really need to have a full tang? For me, the full tang knife is only valuable if you abuse your knife by batoning it through logs. I think that's the purpose of the full tang comes into. But then again, if I know I'm going to split wood, I will not abuse my knife. I will bring an axe. So in my world, I don't need a full tang knife because I don't abuse them that way. And the movements that I do whittling using my whole strength, body strength, arm strength, or wrist strength is perfectly capable enough for these type of knives, rat tail knives. And why I like rat tail knives is that I like how to make the handles for them. I think it's you just add material after material and you can choose whatever you want, and then you compress everything by pinning the end of it. But in my world, full tang knives as a requirement for outdoor knives, no, because I grew up using. Oh yeah, this is a full tang knife. This is a full tang knife technically, but this is what I grew up with, and so maybe technically this is the perfect outdoors knife. Plus that it's a lot more efficient to split wood with an axe than it is with batoning a knife. And I would say even that it's a lot more safer splitting wood with an axe than it is to baton a knife through logs. A lot more safer. So maybe it's a weight issue that we don't bring axes with us, and instead we try to find the perfect bushcrafting knife. So that brings us to the question of weight issue when we go out there. But for me, that's not an issue because I'm strong. I've been a fisherman out on the North Atlantic. I have huge guns, enormous forearm muscles, and weight is not a problem for me. Who am I kidding? But honestly, guys, weight is an issue. But I decided that I would get used to it. I would get comfortable with it. So I practiced with it. With outstretched arms to the point where and practice with them. Get the skills to use them and also get the physicality to handle them. I think you understand what I mean. If your goal is to do a marathon, you don't start by a marathon. Step by step, you level up. And that's how I see being outdoors and the equipment we bring with us. It has to match our own capabilities, our own limitations. And sometimes we have to step it up if our limitations do not match the requirements for bigger equipments. So we have to step it up. I still practice with this now and then. It's also how not to waste energy and use the axe's own weight and energy to perform the task. So is it one knife to cover all needs? In my world, no. In my world, it's one axe to cover all needs, and it might be different for you. Alright guys, see you on the next video.